maybe not a language you use a lot in the front end. So most people in here might rather use the back end. So I will help you to use even more the back end, and we will try to get rid of the front end today. And I try to help you with some tricks or some concepts how to solve this actually. So me, for myself, I'm more a front-end developer. So I do develop Ruby, I love Ruby more than JavaScript, and I love Ruby so much that I want you to focus on that, what you love, Ruby. So, this is me. My name is Nico Hagenburger. You find me everywhere on the internet, Twitter, GitHub, Dribble, whatever, at my last name, Hagenburger. I'm from Germany. If you never heard of Germany, this is the country producing this. It's called China oil. We found the right market to sell the China oil in Taiwan. So, I'm not sure if we do anything else. I'm also working on this. It's called Living Style Guide. It's a Ruby jam to generate front-end style guides and documentation. And working on this for 2 years now, but I'm not talking about this today. This is also part of the Rails Girls Summer of Code. We have 2 girls from Mexico working on Living Style Guide this summer, and we have 1 person from this company here. So I'm really excited to meet somebody finally in person, and this is a really cool thing to get more women into coding. And I was just organizing the Eurocamp in Berlin, so that's the town where I'm living, and as you can see, it's the best conference for me, because the colors are totally the colors I love. Okay, let's start first. We have backend developers and front-end developers. And for this conference, I assume most of them are Ruby backend developers. So what are their needs and what is the special thing about them? So a backend developer, the first thing I can think about a backend developer, a good one, they're hard to hire. Yeah, but if you have one, their world is something like databases, services, and Ruby. So maybe they don't develop databases themselves, but they're used to use them. Maybe that's not a part of the front-end developer. So what's a front-end developer? Actually, they're even harder to hire. There's so much technology going on, so Rails is there for, I don't know, I'm using it for 9 years now, and there were some versions that changed, you always had to learn it again, but for the front end, especially for the JavaScript, you have to rewrite your complete application every year to be cool. And front-end developers want to be cool, I guess. Ruby developers, they are just cool, so they don't need to change. And their working environment, totally JavaScript-based nowadays. As much as I love Ruby, I have to acknowledge that most people use JavaScript in the front end. There are great tools. There's too little space in that line to list all of them. So you can argue about which is the best one. They all help you. The Rails asset pipeline still is great. I love it more than those tools because of the simplicity, but there are so many downsides, like nobody's using it in the big front-end community, so those tools are better because everybody's using them. And they might not like or use Ruby. This is maybe the biggest downside of front-end developers. If you found somebody is really good, and you spent the first time setting up Ruby on their machine, you annoy them the first day. Maybe it's working right away, but this might be a pain in the ass. So, and we want to work together, and from the first day on, as good as possible. So working as a team, keep in mind, JavaScript node might be harder to install than expected. Just one learning I just had, we were switching to Gulp asset pipeline. We just had another talk here, and I was preparing everything so super well, and then I tried it on the computers of the other developers. They had Linux, and it was so hard to get everything running just because of Node. They had the package managers, and everything failed. Just keep this in mind. Yeah, Ruby might even be harder to install. And yeah, the note to self is not everybody's using a MacBook. So for all the people here with the shiny Apple in front of that, there are people out there that actually use other systems. And not everything is working smoothly there. And if you look at Linux, there are so many distributions, it might just be hard. So do we want to combine this? We have the JavaScript world on the one side, which you have to change every year, and the Ruby world on the other side, you need to upgrade every second year. This might cost time if you have everything in once, because all the pain needs to be installed on all computers. So better use this time to separate concerns. Keep the front-end world and keep the back-end world, and just talk to each other, but don't work on the same thing. So we want to split our architecture. We start with a typical project. You might have done this, your startup, you want to have a blog, you want to have a web app, you want to have an iPhone app and an Android app. It's maybe the most common use case. So the iPhone app, you might think it's not actually a front-end topic, but it is. If we look at Facebook, it's just a random website. It's not really an iPhone app for most of the part. In the middle, it's just normal HTML and CSS. So it's more or less a browser. You have some iPhone app down there and up there, and the rest is just delivered as HTML and CSS. They don't even need to update their app. They can just deliver new CSS and it looks different. So that doesn't differ a lot from a normal website. Here I extended this graph a bit more, how the architecture might look like. So if we have the blog written in PHP, because you maybe have not seen the talk yesterday, so it's still a WordPress blog. We have our Rails applications with Ruby here for the web app and for the iPhone app as API. And in the WordPress blog we use HTML, here we use HAML, and here ERB because depending on the team. So it's a totally mixed architecture. We have some databases down there and some other services we don't even want to know. So we have some of the circles, they are simple in one color, and some they are complex because they combine different things. So the first step to solve this is using a style guide. If you have a style guide, you get rid of all those brown things, which is sometimes CSS, SAS, or SCSS. The front-end team can just decide on what they want to use. So afterwards, it looks like that. We have a style guide on the side, which serves all the CSS to the applications. But still, in the applications, we have some sort of HTML in there. And this is the level where a lot of applications are right now. It's much better with the style guide, you can keep consistency very well, but upgrading is hard. If you look at the style guide, we have things like that, we have colors, we have fonts, not interesting. We have all the elements in there. And if you look closer to the elements, this looks like that. So, this is my cat, so I don't want to blame anybody else. We have an example in the style guide how to use the HTML, and then we go into a Rails application and use the HTML. And if you look at both, they're almost the same. So a style guide is a copy and paste API, which is pretty bad. So like really you have to copy everything, slightly adapt it, and paste it. So back to our chart, we have to copy it, paste it here, paste it there, and paste it there, the whole HTML code. And you know HTML can look like a mess. And maybe in one of the applications you use HAML, you even have to convert the pasted code. That doesn't make fun. So what we want to do is, like, also put the HTML into the style guide. So we want to have something like that. We have HTML and CSS in perfect harmony at one place, and the other applications just use their language they want to use. And then, via API, the HTML is served to the applications. Simple thing, they just have an ID, and as every API, they will accept data, define data. So you cannot do anything like HTML. It's not really an API, you can just mess it up as you want. But if you have just data and you accept a username here, a link there, whatever, it's defined as an API. So HTML can't live without CSS, and CSS can't live without HTML. Keep them together, have them as a unit, and serve both of them at the same time. This could look like this. If you change the style guide, you have the template, and you will just show up how to use the template. We will have here an idea of the template, and we'll just have some data at the end and render it. Nothing else. So this looks like a normal API documentation, except there's an image in there. But you know how to use it, you know every case how to use it, and do it. You could call this a remote partial. It's just somewhere else stored, somebody else takes care of it, and you can just use it. If you want to implement this, there are several ways to do that. We have different approaches. We can completely separate it. We have two applications combined to one. We have a Ruby gem or a monolith application, so like Rails. The completely separate one, we have a backend in Rails maybe, we have a front end, maybe some JavaScript, whatever, which is developed in a local machine, and then it's deployed as just static content to make a content delivery service, so it's super fast. But the change process is pretty slow, because every time you need to deploy that, and the Rails application can only use the deployed code. So if you want to quick fix something, this is not the best way to do. But this might work well in very big corporations where the teams, the design teams and the development team are really split up. So the design team delivers first, and then the development team can, in the waterfall process, develop this later on. As an API for that, you can just provide all templates as JSON, and if the application starts up, it reads all templates, and they're available in the application just like normal partials would be available. The second version would be two apps combined. It's very close to this, but just the front-end application runs on your local machine. So if you want to change something, you can just switch in the other application, change it and refresh it, and they will have the API shared on the local machine, and you don't need to do a deployment from that. So this is almost as close as working in your application. But it still doesn't solve the different working environments, because if you have both running on your local machine, then you have to install JavaScript, Node, whatever, and Ruby. It might at least help the front-end developers if they only provide the front-end, and just for the testing and integration into the Rails application, it's running on your local machine. So it's more easy to get new people in, and later on you can also install the Rails application if they're used to work on your team after some while, but in the beginning it's more easy to set up. So, if you combine two applications, you can run the Rails application normally, front application. I use middleman from time to time, I still love Ruby, and yeah, it's more easy. We have the tip for that, use Foreman. Not sure if you heard of it. Foreman is a server starter thingy. You can just define different servers. They all need to be started to have the application running. That might be a Rails application, a middleman, and a database. And you run them in one terminal window, and it helps a lot. Especially if you want to tell other people how to run them. So if you need special ports and everything, you have the configuration in one file. You can also provide this as a gem. As a gem, the really nice thing is you know how this works. You can include it in every application. You can provide helpers, which is really, really useful because you can use the same helpers in the front-end application and the back-end application for rendering. And the form builders are also possible because form builders in Rails are so complex, it's really, really hard to put them into a JavaScript application. So you still need to find a solution there if you want to use them. As a gem, it works very well. But at the end, we are only in a Ruby environment, so this might work well if you just have Ruby developers and front-end developers used to have Ruby. And it's a bit harder to develop. If you have a gem in the application and want to change this, you need to get used to a bit, because every change in the application results just into a change in the gem and how to git commit this and whatever. Okay. Oops. You can have everything in one application, nothing else to change, just the thing you have a style guide rendering all your partials the same way as the application is rendering. That's the most easy step, and it's pretty good for starting. Versioning is a pretty important thing about that. If we have the visual changes, the CSS changes in the style guide, and the HTML and the applications need to reflect that. You never know when the HTML is used for this. So if you have the user, it's just 10 different points, and you always have to put the changes in there. For an example, here is a form. We changed the form from a simple form to a more complex form, which also can accept some additional data. So every form field needs to be changed to have a span grabber. Good luck in changing this in your application. If you have an API which just delivers the form, and you say like, you have a new field setting like the additional, the label. Every field that doesn't have a label will work right away, and you just need to add the label into new sections, and it will render because it's defined at one place and delivered by API. Version numbers could either be like a gem version, or what I prefer is just the GitHub commit hash. This is some idea I was working on. Just load everything from a URL, all the templates, and have a git commit in that. The big advantage of that is, with every commit, it changes automatically. You don't need to set up version manually. And the front end usually gets a lot of changes, because you have all the small fixes. There's an Internet Explorer bar here, and there's whatever. And so don't always make the version numbers, because you might forget it. Testing is the next thing. A good API is tested well, because the application interface is so simple. It's defined what it accepts and what it not accepts. It's easy to test. You might have heard of the atomic design by Brad Frost. It's very good if you have a concept like this. So you start with buttons maybe on the left side and getting to more complex systems there. All of those components are available via API and all can be tested. So if you make a split here as the API, we have the backend views using all of them as default pages, and we have the components in the front end templates. We call it partials in Rails. We can test them. So we have unit tests on the left side. We give different data in there, and so like having the value for the currency, in the example before, having a not, and it should render well. This works best with regression testing. So we have the old version and the new version, and it might look almost the same, but we took screenshots out of them, and the computer is intelligent enough to find a big difference between them. So actually the buttons got a little bit bigger, and the regression test will just make a nice graphic like this, highlighting all the changes that happened, so you can fix that. This is hard to test in a real application because you have to render the whole application. But if you have a style guide with testing data, it's easier to test. A test case could be simple as this. We have an example before. Here's a normal example. We have another test case. You might have known him. Here the test is failing. You can easily see, you can create test data with long and short names, and this is what an API is for. We just test different input data for the API as we do this in a Ruby application. So, this is the default test on the left. Here's something I would call an edge case. Just be sure what could be the cases that fail for this. So the front end takes care of the design don't work and won't break, the content won't break, and the devices won't break. So devices as in a phone, a MacBook, a tablet, whatever. The backend takes care of the workflows won't break, the user input won't break, and the security won't break. So you can split up very well on the concerns. thing, it's a bit difficult, JavaScript. I haven't been talking about JavaScript except for Gulp frontend or so. Yes, it might work. It depends on your framework. I think, I know for backbone this works really well. Also for Ember, it seems to work well. I guess for Angular, I'm not an Angular expert, it would not work well this way because you have all those Angular directives in the HTML code, and I couldn't come up with a good solution for that. So if you use Angular, you might not want to do this. If you use another framework, think about it, ask people they know well, and maybe it works, maybe not. For super traditional Rails applications, it works really well. For blocks, it could really work really well. And for some of the JavaScript applications, I've been using that. Next thing is internationalization, especially in the translation thing. It might be a part of the front end, so we should put it in there. We have the translations that need typography. Typography requires designers, and designers work in the front end team. For example, we have the 100%, 50%, and 0%. If you don't see it, this is a normal space, this is no space. And from a typographic perspective, you want half of the space. The backend can't take care of this. There is a half-space character in Unicode defined, but sometimes this doesn't work. So you need maybe an additional span wrapper to decrease the font size to 50% or something like that. So internationalization is design and user experience. So I think it's part of the front end. Conclusions. We have some, or I've got some learnings. Keep it as simple as possible. Really. Don't do too much technical thing. It's hard to set up then. Try using Mustache. So really focus on data and outputting the data. We had some other talks that might help you preparing the data. Test the setup before releasing to your coworkers. The machines are so different, and write a really good README how to start your application using the design. That's the most important thing. You don't want to annoy your coworkers. As a takeaway, your team must be comfortable with that architecture. The front end and the back end getting more and more different, so you might want to split that up. But cherry pick all the stuff you want to have. So I'm not saying you have to do everything like I said this. Just pick what you like. If you only want to do it as part of your Rails application as a simple step, do it. It might be an improvement. If you want to have a super complicated architecture and you feel comfortable, do it. Just think about this. And yeah, be aware some JavaScript framework might be hard to use. I've got some URLs for you. I will share them later on. So I made a little thing that does this for Rails middleware pretty well. You could also use Webpack. It does something similar to this. You can use that. You can also read Atomic Design from Brad Frost. And I will share the slides later on Twitter. This is my account. And I hope I'm used to write characters. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico.
So I guess we don't have time for questions.
Maybe one, just one.